What's up guys, Coach Az here. Today I'm basically going to do you a seminar on nutrition. We're going to talk about everything. We're going to break it down from the biggest macro level up here to the micro level right here down at the bottom. Today is very much like a whiteboard lesson. Get your notepad out, make some notes, relate this back to yourself. It's not going to be the most entertaining video you've ever seen, but I promise you it's going to be full of information. So if you were ever unsure about how you should be approaching your nutrition on a daily basis so that you're energized for training, ready for fight day, all that stuff, we're going to cover a lot of information today. Sit down, get your drink ready, get your notepad, and let's get it going. Think of this as nutrition 101 for fighters. What we're not going to talk about today is weight cutting, where your meals and food will change coming right up to a fight, or how you might refuel after a fight. We're talking about our year-round general nutrition, how we want to be eating on a daily, regular basis, not just in the build up to special events where things might change. If you enjoy this video, then I'll do a follow-up video on things like eating for a weight cut or eating for a tournament or refueling after and all the rest of it. Today we're going over the basics. Now there's a lot of numbers to crunch here. To make it easy, I'm going to use myself as a reference, and I've sat over here on the side so that I can put all the information up here as we go through it so that you can follow along. But I'm going to put all the tools I use to calculate everything down in the description box below so that you, after this or as we're going along, can do it for yourself. Now, like I said, we're going to start at the most macro level. That's the largest level that we need to think at, and that is with calories. Now, undoubtedly, you've heard this word or you've seen it on the back of food. You've seen them talk about it in adverts. Calories basically is a unit of measurement for energy. It's the amount of energy that we either consume through eating and drinking foods or use through exercise and movement. Obviously, for martial artists, for fighters, we expend a lot of calories. We use a lot of energy, so we need to consume a lot of energy to support that movement and that training. Now, in that sense, our nutrition is really simple. We are very simple machines in the sense that if you eat more calories than you need, as in more calories than you burn, your body will gain weight, both in muscle mass and in fat. If you don't eat enough, as in you eat less than your body needs, then your body will break down. You will lose weight, both in muscle mass and in fat. So one of the most important things that we must do first of all is we must work out how many calories do we need? How many calories do we get through in a day? And although there's a very simple way, and I'm going to show you how to do it, you must understand that this is not something that can simply be calculated online. It's something that you need to adjust and play with to figure out, because everyone is different. And especially when you include something like martial art training, which in terms of how many calories you burn, that's a very difficult thing to calculate. It's very hard to know exactly how much you burn in a training session, and therefore how much you need to eat or drink to refuel afterwards. However, in order to get a baseline, what we can use, what we are going to use, is a BMR calculator. BMR stands for Basal Metabolic Rate. And basically, this is the amount of calories estimated based on a few bits of information that you would burn in a day. And it's a good place to start because it gives you a ballpark figure of where you're at, and then you can adjust this if you need more or need less in terms of calories. So this is what a BMR calculator will ask you for. It's going to ask you what your gender is. Are you male or female? It's going to ask you what your age is. It's going to ask you how tall you are, and it's going to ask you what you weigh. And finally, your activity level. Now, if you're actively training, that activity level is going to be the highest. It's going to be very high. That means that you are actively training and moving 5+ days a week. You need to be really honest with yourself at this point, because obviously which one of those activity levels you select is going to affect the calculation and the number that it spits out for you at the end. So I've done this for myself. I'm a male, I'm 32 years of age, I'm 6 foot tall, I weigh 180 pounds. Now, for my UK guys who only do things in stones or in kilos, it's just easier when it comes to the maths for the protein, carbs and fats later if you get your weight in pounds. So switch your scale up and just get that weight in pounds, because it's going to be helpful later on. And of course, I'm very active, training 5+ days a week, as well as moving around, working and all the rest of it. And this number that it spat out for me was 3,113 calories. So the idea is, roughly speaking, I need to consume that number of calories per day in order to maintain my current weight, and body mass. If I regularly and consistently ate under that number, I would lose weight. If I regularly and consistently ate over that number, I would gain weight. All right, so that's stage one. Now we're gonna talk about our macronutrients. What this means is all our calories that we consume are only made up of one of three things. They're either proteins, carbs, or fats, or obviously a combination of two or more of those elements. These protein, carbs, and fats are essential nutrients. They're things that we need for different processes within the body. Our protein, that's all about muscle building, muscle recovery. So when we train, when we exercise, when we work out, our body breaks down our muscle fibers and it uses protein to rebuild them. As well as this, it's also just our body's rebuilding process. How we grow hair, how we repair our skin, all these things where our cells in our body are constantly breaking down and rebuilding. They're using protein in order to do this. Carbohydrates, that's our body's naturally preferred source of energy. So the first thing that your body's going to try to look for and break down to use for energy is going to be carbohydrates. Again, when we exercise, our body will burn carbs in order to give us the energy to provide us the nutrients in order to do our exercise. Fats can be used as a source of energy. So you might have heard of the term being ketogenic, which is effectively where you get to a point where the carbs in your system are so low that your body switches to burning fat instead of burning carbs as a source. However, more importantly, fats are used to balance your hormones and to handle a lot of those important processes that happen within the body as well. Your protein sources are going to be meats, dairy, eggs, soya, legumes, beans, lentils. Of course, a lot of the choices that you make about what protein source you take on are going to take into things like environmental impact and your consciousness around eating animal proteins and all the rest of it. So I'm just giving you a list of what's available to you. Obviously, that's going to be personal to you. Carbohydrate sources, we're looking at potatoes, rice, pasta, grains, bread. And finally, fat sources, oils, which is olive oil, rapeseed oil, avocado oil. If you eat meats, if you take on animal proteins or even dairy, there's a lot of fat contained in there. And of course, the humble avocado has a lot of fats in there as well. All right, so that's all well and good, but how do these protein, carbs, and fats translate to our calories? Because remember, we've got this number now. For me, it was 3,113 calories. How do I translate that number into my protein, carbs, and fats? Well, each one of these vital nutrients per gram have a set amount of calories. 1 gram of protein has 4 calories. 1 gram of carbs also has 4 calories. And 1 gram of fat has 9 calories. So you can see that fats carry more than double the caloric value than either protein or carbohydrates. So think of your calories, that number, that 3113, that is my bank account. It's how many calories I have to use within the day. And I can use them as I wish. I can spend them how I like. But I need to keep in mind that, for example, when we were talking about the fats, that fats cost me a lot more than carbs or protein. Beyond that, we also want to reach certain amounts. Like for example, if we were talking about money, you need to make sure that you've paid your rent before you go buy those nice shoes that you like. Same thing goes here. You need to make sure you're getting the right amount of each nutrient before you're topping up to meet your final calorie requirement at the end of the day. As a general rule of thumb, athletic people want to aim for 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight. So this is again why I asked you to go back and weigh yourself in pounds, because it's just easier to get these numbers out once you've got that. I weigh 180 pounds, so I'm aiming for 180 grams of protein per day. Now, if we remember, per gram of protein equals 4 calories. So if we times that by 4, 720 calories of protein per day is 180 grams of protein digested per day. That works out to around 23% of our caloric budget for the day. Now, carbohydrates, I believe personally that martial artists, that active athletes need to go quite high with carbs in order to provide their body with the right amount of energy to fuel the intense workouts as well as the recovery process afterwards. So for this example, we're going to go with 2.5 grams per pound of body weight. So 2.5 times 180 pounds of body weight will give me 450 grams of carbs. This works out to 1,800 calories. and makes up 57% of our caloric budget for the day. Now, when you add those two things together, that's gonna leave you with 593 calories remaining, which we are gonna give to fat. Remembering that per gram, that gives you 9 calories for fat. That's gonna give us 66 grams of fat, and it's gonna make up 20% of our total caloric budget. All right, so with all that in mind, here's what we've got in the day. We're gonna eat 3,113 calories. That's 720 calories of protein, or 180 grams. That's 1,800 calories of carbs, or 450 grams. And that's 593 calories in fats, or 66 grams, giving us a macronutrient breakdown or profile of 23% protein, 57% carbohydrates, and 20% fats. Now, this is important. All of this is adjustable. You can increase and decrease these numbers as long as the total ends up at 100% and that you're hitting that caloric budget. You can adjust the parameters of how much of each of these macronutrients you have. If you feel like that's too much carbs, you can increase your fats or you can increase your protein. Take, for example, ladies, they don't often need to do 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight, so they might drop that down to 0.75. But again, that means they'll have to increase either their fats or their carbohydrates to make up that caloric deficit. All right, so this is where it gets interesting, because now we got to look at how do we spread that out through the day? And really, there's no right or wrong answer with this. You can do this all if you really want. If you're that crazy, you can do it all in one meal. Obviously, you're not going to do that. So let's take a real normal eating example of trying to do this in 3 meals and evenly trying to divide up these macros. This would mean that per meal, you'd be eating 1,038 calories, 60 grams of protein, 150 grams of carbs, and 22 grams of fats. Translated into like the real world, that's like eating 2 whole large chicken breasts, 3 cups of rice, and like a whole avocado. Now, for some of you, that might seem like an okay amount of food. For others, that might seem like way too much to consume in one go, especially let's say it's before your workout, you don't want to have a heavy stomach. This is the argument for why we might want to distribute all these calories over more meals. Take, for example, 5 or 6. If we did 5 meals, and again, we're talking if we were going to evenly distribute this, which you don't need to do, it would only be 623 calories per meal, which would be 36 grams of protein, 90 grams of carbs, and only 13 grams of fat. Now, again, what these meals are made up of and how you distribute all that stuff is up to you, but I'm gonna give you a few tips to try and make all of this a little bit easier to work out and to plan for yourself. Tip number 1 is for at least a couple of weeks, track your calories and track your macros. There's loads of apps out there. MyFitnessPal is probably the most common and most popular. And what this allows you to do is it allows you to punch in exactly what you've eaten and it will spit out these numbers. How much protein you've taken in, how much carbs, how much fat, how much calories, and what the breakdown of all that is. It'll even show it to you in like a little pie chart so you can see the percentages that you're hitting each day. You don't need to do this forever, but what it does do is it gives you an eye for what everything is within a normal day of you eating. We all are the same in the sense that we probably eat the same selection of meals throughout a few weeks. So once you've worked out what these meals comprise of, you no longer need to track. You'll be able to do most of this by eye. But it's a really important thing to do at least once, because it will really shock you to find that maybe you're way under or way over on calories, on proteins, on your fats, or even your carbs. The next thing is to plan your meals ahead of time. Whether this means that you cook a bunch of meals, so you do a meal prep day, or you can still eat fresh, eat as you go along, but make sure you know what you're going to be eating. If we don't plan our meals ahead, we're far more likely to fall off and just eat a whole bunch of carbs without taking on any protein or any fats. And if we're just guessing as we go through the day, when we get to the end of the day and we look at our calories and we look at our macros, it's very unlikely that we're just naturally going to hit the correct numbers. Spread the protein out evenly throughout your day. This isn't anything to do with like protein synthesis and when you can absorb protein. It just goes back to that idea that, for example, for me, 180 grams of protein in a day, that's a difficult thing to do. So if I'm trying to cram all of that into one meal and having to eat 2 large chicken breasts 3 times a day, for example, that's an extreme example, but you can see how that's not sustainable. Whereas if if I spread it out through the day, maybe I use a bit of supplementation with a protein powder, it makes it far easier to achieve on a regular basis. Be strategic with your carbs. You don't need to evenly split them like we did in those examples. I go very carb heavy in the morning and before my workouts. And then as I go through the day and I require less energy, I drop the carbs out. So I make sure that my early meals are very high carb and I hit those numbers very early in the day. And by the end of the day, I'm making up the protein deficit and the fats within my mix. And finally, don't forget about micronutrients. Micronutrients are our vitamins and our minerals. Martial artists sweat a lot, and through our sweat, we use and we lose a lot of our vital nutrients. Things like vitamin C, vitamin D, the sodium in our diet, the salt. All of these things go because we use them in our workouts. So it's so important for us to be eating our vegetables, eating fruit, taking our daily multivitamin, ensuring that we're drinking enough water, ensuring that we are taking on some salt. I know a lot of people think salt is the enemy, but you sweat out a ton. And if you think of like an isotonic sports drink, really what that is it's a sweet drink with a bit of salt in it. It's replacing a lot of the minerals that we lose through our sweat. You know your sweat is salty, right? That's the salt leaving your body. You need to replenish that. So salt is not something to be avoided. Fats and carbs, these aren't things to be avoided. Don't listen to a lot of the mainstream media and what they tell you about nutritional advice. It's not aimed at people who are super athletic and super active. Finally, drink a lot of water. I'm talking 2+ liters per day. You need to stay well hydrated. It's probably one of the most powerful and useful things that you can do in terms of looking after your body, your mind. So please drink loads of water as well as trying to maintain everything else that we spoke about today. Guys, I hope this video has been helpful. I've thrown a lot of information at you. Always remember that it's a very personal thing. This is just for you as a general guide so that you can take it away and work it out for yourself. All the information I've tried to include in the description box below. Let me know what you want to see next. Hit the like button, hit subscribe, and I will see you on the next one.